It all began in the fall of 2018 in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Chicago. The kind of place where houses had neatly trimmed lawns, kids rode bikes down the street, and neighbors exchanged friendly waves while walking their dogs. At first glance, it seemed like an idyllic slice of American life. But for 42-year-old Ethan Moore, life in the suburbs wasn't exactly picture-perfect. Ethan had spent most of his adult life working as an accountant, a job he was undeniably great at but found painfully mundane. He had a keen eye for detail and a knack for solving puzzles, traits that served him well both professionally and personally. At home, Ethan was the epitome of the reliable family man. He was married to Laura, his high school sweetheart, and together they had built a seemingly happy life over 20 years of marriage. They had 2 kids, 17-year-old Emma, a talented violinist with dreams of attending Juilliard, and 14-year-old Josh, whose passion for coding kept him glued to his laptop. Now, here's the thing about Ethan. He wasn't flashy or extravagant. In fact, he prided himself on being a creature of habit. Every weekday morning at 7:15 sharp, he left their cozy, 2-story colonial home, thermos of black coffee in hand, and made the 30-minute drive to his office. His evenings were just as predictable: family dinners, an hour of TV, and a quick glance at the day's finances before bed. For Ethan, life was simple, orderly, and predictable. Until it wasn't. The first crack in Ethan's carefully constructed world appeared on a Thursday evening in late September. Laura had just returned home from one of her many book club meetings, a monthly tradition that Ethan never thought twice about. As she walked through the door, she greeted Ethan with her usual warm smile, kissed him on the cheek, and placed a half-empty bottle of Merlot on the counter. "How was the book club?" Ethan asked, not looking up from his laptop. He was reviewing their monthly expenses, a routine he'd developed to stay on top of their budget. "Oh, it was lovely," Laura replied breezily, kicking off her heels. "We discussed that new mystery novel you were raving about, Twisted Lies. You should join us one day. You'd probably have a lot to say about the plot twists." Ethan chuckled softly but didn't respond. His attention had shifted to a series of unfamiliar charges on their joint credit card statement. He scrolled through the list. The Blue Orchid Spa, $275. Maison Blanche Bistro, $210. And another one, the Velvet Room, $350. "What's this?" Ethan muttered under his breath. Laura froze mid-step. "What's what?" "These charges," Ethan said, gesturing toward the laptop. "The spa, the bistro, and... what is the Velvet Room? Is that a restaurant?" For a split second, Laura's face betrayed a flicker of unease, but she quickly recovered. "Oh, those?" she said with a casual laugh. "It's nothing serious. Just some outings with the girls from book club. You know how they like to splurge on wine and facials." Ethan nodded, though a faint alarm bell rang in his mind. Laura's explanation made sense. She had always been social, and book club outings weren't unusual. Still, something about her tone felt off, like a poorly rehearsed script. But Ethan brushed it aside. After all, trust was the foundation of their marriage. Fast forward a week, and Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just the credit card charges. It was Laura's sudden increase in book club meetings, 3 times in 2 weeks, when it was usually once a month. It was the late-night text messages from someone named Maddie, followed by Laura's hurried explanations and quick deletions. And it was the perfume, Santal Noir, her favorite fragrance, which lingered just a little too strongly on her clothes when she came home. Ethan tried to tell himself he was overthinking. Maybe she really was spending more time with friends. Maybe Maddie was just gossiping about some drama Ethan wouldn't care about. But the puzzle pieces weren't fitting together, and Ethan couldn't ignore his gut instinct. Something was wrong. That's when he decided to investigate. Started small. Ethan didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband snooping through his wife's things. But curiosity got the better of him, and one night while Laura was in the shower, Ethan glanced at her phone, which was charging on the nightstand. He tapped the screen, half hoping he wouldn't find anything. But there it was, a message notification from someone named N. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. Same time next week. Ethan's stomach dropped. Who's N? He wondered, trying to keep his breathing steady. He didn't recognize the name, and the message could have been innocent. But it didn't feel innocent. Ethan stared at the phone for what felt like an eternity, debating whether to unlock it. But before he could decide, Laura emerged from the bathroom, towel wrapped around her, and Ethan quickly placed the phone back on the nightstand. The next morning, Ethan couldn't focus at work. The message replayed in his mind like a broken record, each word dripping with implications. Who was this N? What had Laura been doing? And why did the message sound so intimate? By lunchtime, Ethan's unease had reached a boiling point. That's when he made a decision that would change everything. He hired a private investigator. His colleague had once mentioned a firm that specialized in discreet investigations, and Ethan figured it was better than confronting Laura without concrete evidence. "Hi, this is Ethan Moore," he said, his voice low as he spoke into his phone from the privacy of his car. "I need your help with something personal." The investigator, Margot Simmons, was a no-nonsense woman with a sharp wit and years of experience. After Ethan explained the situation, she assured him that her team could uncover the truth. "Give me a week," Margot said. "If there's something to find, we'll find it." In the days that followed, Ethan tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. He went to work, attended Emma's violin recital, and helped Josh debug a glitch in his latest coding project. But underneath the surface, he was a mess. Every time Laura's phone buzzed, every time she left the house, every time she smiled at him, he wondered, is it all a lie? 1 week later, Margot called. "We need to meet in person," she said, her tone professional but serious. "There's a lot to discuss." And just like that, Ethan's world was about to unravel. The air in the cafe was thick with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the soft hum of conversation. But Ethan's mind was elsewhere. He sat in the corner booth, his fingers drumming against the table as he waited for Margot. The investigator arrived precisely on time, dressed in a sharp navy blazer and carrying a sleek black folder. "You're punctual," Ethan remarked nervously. "I'm thorough," Margot replied, sliding into the seat across from him. She wasted no time, placing the folder on the table and flipping it open. "This is what we found." Ethan's heart raced as Margot laid out a series of photographs and documents. Each image told a story he wasn't prepared to hear. Laura, dressed elegantly, entering a boutique hotel. Laura laughing at an intimate dinner with a man Ethan didn't recognize. And then the worst of it, Laura leaving the hotel hand in hand with the same man, a tall figure with salt and pepper hair and an all-too-confident smile. "This is him?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "His name is Nathan Hale," Margot said, confirming what Ethan feared. "A lawyer, divorced, no kids. He and Laura have been meeting regularly for about 3 months. Dinner, spa dates, overnight stays. The works." Ethan felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. He stared at the photos, trying to reconcile the woman in them with the Laura he thought he knew. 3 months, he murmured. That's when she started going to more book club meetings. Margot nodded. It's typical. Cover stories like that make it easier to explain time away. Ethan clenched his fists. Why would she do this? We have a good life, a family. Why risk it all for? He couldn't even finish the sentence. Margot leaned back, her gaze steady. That's a question only she can answer. The real question is, what do you want to do about it? The first confrontation. That evening, Ethan couldn't focus on anything else. The images burned in his mind like scars, each one a reminder of Laura's betrayal. At dinner, he watched her closely as she laughed with Emma about an upcoming recital and asked Josh about his coding project. She was so normal, so convincing. When the kids left the table, Ethan finally spoke. How was book club last night? He asked, his tone even. Laura smiled, completely unsuspecting. Oh, it was great. Maddie brought this amazing charcuterie board, and we had the best Cabernet. Maddie, Ethan interrupted, his voice sharpening. Or Nathan. The color drained from Laura's face. "What are you talking about?" she stammered. Ethan pushed his chair back and stood. "Stop lying to me, Laura. I know everything. The hotels. The dinners. Him." Laura opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her silence said more than any excuse could. "Why?" Ethan demanded, his voice cracking. "We've built a life together. Family. And this is how you repay me." Laura's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" he shot back. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been sneaking around with another man while I've been at home holding everything together." Laura stood, her hands trembling. "I didn't plan for this to happen," she said quietly. "Nathan, he listens to me, Ethan. He makes me feel seen." Ethan's laugh was bitter. "Seen? I've been here, Laura. I've always been here." The argument spiraled from there, voices raised, accusations flying. Ethan demanded answers, but Laura's responses only deepened the wound. By the time it was over, Ethan left the house, slamming the door behind him. He needed air, space, anything to clear his head. Shifting dynamics. The next few days were a blur of tension and avoidance. Ethan slept in the guest room, and Laura walked on eggshells, trying to keep up appearances for the kids. But the facade was cracking, and it wasn't long before Emma and Josh noticed. "Is everything okay with you and Mom?" Emma asked one evening, her brow furrowed with concern. Ethan hesitated. "Your mom and I are working through some things," he said, forcing a smile. "Don't worry about it." But Emma wasn't convinced, and neither was Josh, who began spending even more time in his room, escaping into his world of coding. The once harmonious Moore household was now a minefield, every conversation laden with unspoken tension. Meanwhile, Ethan wrestled with what to do next. Margot had offered to dig deeper, to uncover more about Nathan, but Ethan wasn't sure he could handle it. Every piece of evidence felt like another dagger to the heart. And yet, he couldn't let it go. Escalation. 1 week later, Ethan received an email from Margot. It contained a link to a video security footage from the hotel Laura and Nathan frequented. With a shaky hand, Ethan clicked play. The grainy footage showed Laura and Nathan in the lobby, laughing and holding hands as they waited for the elevator. Ethan couldn't watch it all. He closed the laptop, his chest heaving with anger and pain. It was one thing to see photos, but watching it unfold on video made it all too real. That night, he confronted Laura again. "This ends now," he said, his tone icy. "You're going to tell him it's over." Laura looked at him, her face pale. "Ethan, Or what?" he snapped. "You'll lose everything, Laura. The house, the kids, everything we've built. Is he worth that?" Tears streamed down Laura's face as she nodded. "I'll end it. I swear." But Ethan wasn't sure he believed her. Turning point. The next morning, Ethan called Margot again. "I want you to follow her," he said. "I need to know if she's really ending it." Margot didn't hesitate. "Consider it done." 2 days later, Margot sent Ethan an update. Laura and Nathan had met again. This time, it wasn't at the hotel. It was at a park, a place Ethan had taken Laura on their first date. The audacity of it made Ethan's blood boil. It was clear Laura wasn't ready to let Nathan go, and Ethan realized he needed to take matters into his own hands. Stay tuned for what happens next as this story takes an even darker turn. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Story Tales for more gripping tales of betrayal and consequences. The next morning, Ethan called Margot with a new plan. "I want to meet him," he said, his voice calm but steely. Margot hesitated. "Ethan, are you sure? Confronting him directly could get messy." "I don't care. He needs to know who he's messing with." Margot agreed to arrange a meeting. Using her network of contacts, she discovered Nathan's favorite cafe, a sleek, upscale spot downtown where he often spent his mornings. The plan was simple. Ethan would accidentally bump into Nathan, setting the stage for a face-to-face confrontation. 3 days later, Ethan walked into the cafe. It was bustling with the morning rush, but he spotted Nathan immediately. A tall, charismatic man in a tailored suit, typing away on his laptop in a corner booth. Ethan felt a surge of anger just looking at him, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Excuse me," Ethan said as he approached the booth. "Are you Nathan Hale?" Nathan looked up, confused. "Yes, I am. Can I help you?" Ethan extended his hand, forcing a polite smile. "Ethan Moore. I believe you know my wife, Laura." The color drained from Nathan's face. For a moment he was speechless. Then, recovering quickly, he gestured to the seat across from him. "Ethan, have a seat." Ethan sat down, keeping his eyes locked on Nathan. "Let's skip the pleasantries. I know what's been going on. I've seen the photos, the videos. I know everything." Nathan exhaled, leaning back in his chair. "Look, Ethan, I didn't save it." Ethan interrupted, his tone sharp. "I don't care what excuses you have. You've been sneaking around with my wife for months. Lying to her, lying to me. But that ends now." Nathan held up his hands defensively. "I didn't mean for this to happen, okay? It just did." Ethan laughed bitterly. "That's the best you can come up with? It just happened? Let me tell you what's going to happen now. You're going to stay away from Laura. No calls, no texts, no accidental meetings. If I even hear your name again, I'll make sure everyone you know, your clients, your colleagues, your friends, finds out exactly who you are and what you've done." Nathan nodded quickly. "Understood." Ethan stood, towering over the other man. "Good. And one more thing. The next time you think about messing with another man's wife, think twice." With that, Ethan walked out of the cafe, his heart pounding. The confrontation was over, but the war wasn't. A false sense of security. For the next week, things seemed to improve. Laura stayed home more, her phone noticeably silent during the evenings. She even suggested they have a family movie night, something they hadn't done in months. Ethan cautiously allowed himself to hope that she had ended things with Nathan. But a part of him remained suspicious. That suspicion was confirmed when Margot called again. "I hate to be the bearer of bad news," she said. "But they're still seeing each other. More discreetly this time. But my team caught them meeting at a park yesterday." Ethan felt the familiar surge of anger, but this time, it was mixed with determination. If Laura and Nathan thought they could outsmart him, they were about to learn how wrong they were. The turning point. Ethan decided it was time to confront Laura with everything he had. No more chances, no more excuses. He waited until the kids were out of the house, then called Laura into the living room. "What's going on?" she asked nervously, sensing the tension in his voice. Ethan didn't respond. Instead, he opened his laptop and played the video Margot had sent him. Laura watched in stunned silence as the grainy footage of her and Nathan played out on the screen. When it ended, she turned to Ethan, her face pale. "Ethan, don't," he said, his voice cold. "Don't lie to me again. I've given you every opportunity to come clean, to fix this, and you've done nothing but dig yourself deeper." Tears streamed down Laura's face. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Then why didn't you stop it?" Ethan demanded. "You had every chance to end it, but instead, you kept sneaking around, disrespecting me, disrespecting our family." Laura sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry isn't enough," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Fallout and consequences. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Ethan filed for a trial separation, and Laura moved out of the house to stay with her sister. Emma and Josh were devastated when they learned the truth, and Ethan did his best to shield them from the worst of it. Meanwhile, Nathan faced consequences of his own. True to his word, Ethan sent an anonymous tip to the law firm where Nathan worked, including the video evidence of his affair with Laura. Within days, Nathan was let go, his once promising career in shambles. But for Ethan, the real challenge was learning to move forward. He had spent so many years building a life with Laura, and now that life was gone. He poured himself into his work, his kids, and slowly began to rebuild. Stay tuned for the dramatic conclusion to this story, where Ethan faces one final confrontation that will change everything. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Story Tales for the final chapter of this gripping tale. Ethan was starting to feel the weight of his decisions. The separation from Laura had created a chasm in his life that wasn't easy to ignore. But he kept telling himself it was necessary. Trust, once broken, couldn't be easily mended. Despite his efforts to stay strong, there were moments of doubt, moments when he wondered if things could have been different. It was during one of those moments, 2 weeks after Laura had moved out, that Ethan had an unexpected encounter. He was at the local grocery store, picking up ingredients for a Sunday dinner with the kids, when he saw her, Laura. She was in the wine aisle, looking as though she'd aged 10 years in the past 2 weeks. Her normally vibrant demeanor was subdued, her shoulders hunched as she stared blankly at a bottle of Cabernet. Ethan hesitated, debating whether to approach her. But before he could decide, she turned and saw him. Their eyes met, and for a moment, it was as if time stood still. "Ethan?" Laura said softly, her voice barely audible. He nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "Laura." There was an awkward silence as they stood there, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. Finally, Laura broke the silence. "How are the kids?" "They're doing fine," Ethan replied curtly. "Missing their mother, of course." Her face crumpled at his words. "I miss them too," she said, her voice trembling. "And you?" Ethan felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Anger, sadness, and a flicker of the love he'd once felt for her. But he forced himself to stay composed. "You made your choices, Laura. Now we're all dealing with the consequences." Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Laura standing in the aisle, clutching the bottle of wine as tears welled in her eyes. New evidence. The encounter with Laura stirred something in Ethan. He didn't want to admit it, but a part of him still cared for her, despite everything. Yet, he couldn't let himself fall into the trap of forgiveness without understanding the full extent of her betrayal. That's when Margot called with another update. "Ethan, I've been digging deeper, and there's something you need to see. Can you come to my office?" Ethan agreed, though his stomach churned at the thought of what else Margot might have uncovered. When he arrived at her office, she handed him a thick folder filled with more photographs, financial records, and text message transcripts. "What's this?" Ethan asked, flipping through the documents. "It's about Nathan," Margot said. "Turns out, he's not just a divorcee looking for love. He has a history of preying on married women. 3 confirmed cases in the past 5 years, all ending in messy divorces and financial settlements that benefited him." Ethan's jaw tightened. "So he's a serial homewrecker." "Exactly," Margot said. "And I have reason to believe he's been using Laura for financial gain. Look at these transactions." She pointed to several bank statements showing large cash withdrawals from Laura's personal account. He's been draining her money. Ethan felt a surge of protective anger. Despite his resentment toward Laura, the thought of Nathan exploiting her made his blood boil. "Does she know?" "I doubt it," Margot replied. "Men like Nathan are experts at manipulation. He probably convinced her it was for something innocent." Ethan clenched his fists. He's not going to get away with this. The confrontation, fueled by a mix of anger and determination, Ethan decided it was time to confront Nathan again. This time with everything he knew. He arranged to meet him at a neutral location, a quiet park on the edge of town. Nathan arrived looking smug, as if he still believed he had the upper hand. "Ethan," Nathan said with a smirk, "what can I do for you this time?" Ethan wasted no time. He pulled out the folder Margot had given him and thrust it into Nathan's hands. "You can start by explaining this." Nathan's confident facade faltered as he flipped through the documents. "Where did you get these?" "That doesn't matter," Ethan said coldly. "What matters is that I know exactly who you are and what you've been doing. You're a parasite, Nathan, feeding off vulnerable women and destroying families for your own gain." Nathan laughed nervously, trying to play it off. "Look, Ethan, I don't know what you think you've uncovered, but save it," Ethan snapped. "You've drained thousands of dollars from Laura's accounts. You've manipulated her, lied to her, And now you're going to pay for it. Nathan's face darkened. And what are you going to do about it? You think you can scare me with a few papers? Ethan stepped closer, his voice low and menacing. I don't need to scare you. I have everything I need to destroy you, professionally and personally. Your name, your history, your crimes. It's all here, and it's all going to the police, the bar association, and anyone else who will listen. For the first time, Nathan looked genuinely afraid. He opened his mouth to speak, but Ethan cut him off. You're going to leave Laura alone. No calls, no texts, nothing. If I find out you've contacted her again, I won't just ruin your career. I'll ruin your life. Nathan nodded reluctantly, realizing he had no other option. Fine, I'll stay away. Good, Ethan said, his voice firm. Because if I see your face again, you'll wish you'd never met me. Laura's realization. Meanwhile, Laura was beginning to realize the depth of Nathan's betrayal. After Ethan's confrontation with Nathan, he sent Laura the financial records, along with a note. This is the man you chose over your family. Make better decisions. At first, Laura was defensive. She couldn't believe that Nathan, the man who had promised her love and understanding, had been using her all along. But as she reviewed the evidence, the truth became undeniable. She was devastated, not just by Nathan's betrayal, but by her own choices that had led her to this point. For the first time, Laura began to take a hard look at herself. She realized that she had been seeking validation from Nathan because she felt unseen and unappreciated in her marriage. But in doing so, she had destroyed the very foundation of her life. She had betrayed Ethan, hurt her children, and allowed herself to be manipulated by a man who saw her as nothing more than a means to an end. A crossroads. Ethan and Laura's paths converged once again, this time under very different circumstances. Laura called Ethan, asking to meet him. Reluctantly, he agreed, curious to hear what she had to say. They met at a small cafe, the same place where Ethan had confronted Nathan weeks earlier. Laura looked tired but determined, her eyes filled with remorse. Thank you for meeting me, she began, her voice shaky. Ethan said nothing, waiting for her to continue. I've spent the past few weeks thinking about everything, she said. About what I've done, what I've lost. I know I can't undo the damage I've caused, but I want you to know how deeply sorry I am. Ethan studied her carefully, searching for any sign of insincerity. But Laura's apology seemed genuine. I was lost, Ethan, she continued, her voice breaking. I felt like I was drowning, and instead of turning to you, I ran away. I let myself believe that someone else could fill the void, but all I did was make things worse. You didn't deserve any of this. Ethan sighed, his anger softening slightly. No, I didn't, and neither did the kids. I know, Laura said, tears streaming down her face, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to them. To you, if you'll let me. Stay tuned as Ethan faces a life-altering decision in the next chapter. Will he forgive Laura, or will he choose to leave the past behind for good? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Story Tales for the conclusion of this emotional journey. Nathan's last play. Ethan thought the confrontation with Nathan had put an end to his interference. But trouble has a way of lingering. Just a few days later, Ethan received an email with the subject line, "You've been warned." Attached was a grainy photo of Laura and Nathan at one of their secret dinners, accompanied by a message. You think you've won, Ethan. But if you push me any further, this is just the beginning of what the world will see. Ethan clenched his fists, the anger bubbling up inside him. Nathan wasn't just desperate, he was dangerous. Ethan knew that Nathan had nothing left to lose, which made him more reckless than ever. But Ethan wasn't about to let a man like Nathan continue to control the narrative. He immediately called Margot. I need to take this to the next level, he said. Can you track down where that email came from? I'm already on it, Margot replied. And Ethan, be careful. Guys like Nathan don't play by the rules. Ethan hung up, his resolve stronger than ever. If Nathan wanted a fight, Ethan was ready to end it once and for all. The breaking point. While Ethan dealt with Nathan's threats, things at home continued to unravel. Emma had grown increasingly distant, retreating into her music, while Josh became irritable and withdrawn. Ethan tried to keep the household together, but it was clear the kids were struggling under the weight of their parents' broken relationship. One evening, as Ethan sat in the living room reviewing documents from Margot, Emma stormed in, her face red with anger. "Are you going to tell me what's going on? Or do I have to find out on my own?" she demanded, holding up her phone. "I saw the messages, Dad. People are talking about Mom and that guy." Ethan's heart sank. He had tried so hard to protect his kids from the fallout, but the rumors had spread faster than he anticipated. "Emma, I'm sorry you had to find out this way," Ethan said, his voice heavy with regret. "But your mom and we're dealing with a lot right now." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Dealing with what? The fact that she cheated? That you guys are probably never getting back together?" "Emma," Ethan started, but she cut him off. I don't want to hear excuses." She stormed out of the room, slamming the door to her bedroom. Ethan sat back, feeling the full weight of the situation. He had fought so hard to protect his family, but it seemed like everything was slipping through his fingers. Margot's breakthrough. The next day, Margot called with a critical update. "Ethan, we traced the email. It came from Nathan's personal laptop, which he accessed using public Wi-Fi at a cafe downtown. We've also found more evidence of his blackmail attempts with other women. This could be enough to involve the authorities." Ethan felt a glimmer of hope. "So, we can take him down?" "Yes," Margot replied, "but we'll need Laura's cooperation to make the case airtight." Ethan hesitated. Asking Laura for help meant reopening wounds that hadn't yet healed. But if it meant ending Nathan's reign of manipulation, it was a risk he was willing to take. Laura's decision. Ethan met Laura at a quiet park, the tension between them palpable. He explained everything Margot had uncovered, including Nathan's history of blackmail and the email threat. Laura listened in stunned silence. "I can't believe he would do this," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought I was special to him." Ethan sighed, his tone softer than before. "He preys on women who think they're special, Laura. That's his game." Laura nodded, tears streaming down her face. "What do you need me to do?" "We need your testimony," Ethan said. "You'll have to tell the authorities everything. How he manipulated you, the financial transactions, all of it." Laura hesitated, the fear evident in her eyes. "What if he retaliates?" Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "He won't. Not if we get to him first." Laura took a deep breath, her expression hardening with resolve. "Okay, I'll do it." The takedown. With Laura's cooperation, Margot was able to compile a rock-solid case against Nathan. Ethan worked with a lawyer to ensure all the evidence was properly documented. And within days, the authorities moved in. Nathan was arrested at his apartment, charged with multiple counts of fraud, blackmail, and harassment. Ethan felt a sense of closure as he watched the news footage of Nathan being led away in handcuffs. For the first time in months, he felt like he had regained control of his life. A family at a crossroads. With Nathan out of the picture, Ethan turned his focus back to his family. He knew the road to healing would be long and difficult, but he was determined to rebuild what had been broken. One evening, he sat down with Emma and Josh for a heart-to-heart conversation. "I know things have been hard lately," he said, "and I know I haven't always handled things the right way. But I want you both to know how much I love you and how hard I'm going to work to make things better." Emma looked at him, her expression softening. "We just want things to feel normal again, Dad." "They will," Ethan promised. "It's going to take time, but we'll get there." Later that night, Ethan called Laura. "We need to talk," he said. Laura's voice was hesitant. "About what?" "About what's next," Ethan said. "For us, for the kids, for everything." Stay tuned for the conclusion to Ethan's journey in the final chapter, where he makes a decision that will define the future for his family. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Story Tales for the gripping finale of this story. ***. The family meeting. Ethan sat at the head of the dining table, the weight of his decision pressing heavily on him. He had called Laura and the kids together for a family meeting, something they hadn't done in months. The room was filled with a tense silence, the kind that came with the anticipation of life-altering news. Emma and Josh sat across from him, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Laura was next to Ethan, visibly nervous, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Thank you all for being here," Ethan began, his voice steady but somber. "I know the past few months have been incredibly hard for all of us. A lot has happened, and I think it's time we face everything head-on." Josh fidgeted with his phone, his eyes darting between Ethan and Laura. "What does that mean, Dad?" "It means we need to talk about what happens next," Ethan said, meeting each of their gazes. "As a family." Emma crossed her arms, her tone sharp. "How are we supposed to do that when we're not even a family anymore?" Her words cut through the room like a knife. Ethan took a deep breath, his gaze softening. "I know it feels that way right now, but I believe we can find a way forward, together." Laura spoke up, her voice trembling. "Emma, Josh, I know I've made mistakes, terrible mistakes, and I'll never forgive myself for the pain I've caused you. But I want you to know that I love you both more than anything, and I want to make things right." Josh looked down at the table, his expression unreadable. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away, refusing to let her emotions show. Ethan cleared his throat. "We're not going to fix this overnight. It's going to take time, effort, and a lot of honesty. But if we're willing to work together, I think we can rebuild what's been broken." A test of forgiveness. After the family meeting, Ethan found himself grappling with his own emotions. Laura's heartfelt apology had struck a chord with him, but forgiveness was a mountain he wasn't sure he could climb. Late that night, he sat in his office, staring at a blank piece of paper. He began to write, "What does forgiveness mean? Is it forgetting the pain? Letting go of the anger? Or is it something deeper, a choice to move forward despite the scars?" The words flowed easily, but the answers remained elusive. Ethan felt torn between his lingering anger and the love he still felt for the woman he had built his life with. He knew that his decision would not only shape his future but also the future of his children. The final confrontation. Just when Ethan thought the storm had passed, Nathan made one last desperate move. Late one evening, Laura called Ethan in a panic. "Nathan just sent me another message," she said, her voice shaking. "He's threatening to leak the photos if I don't pay him." Ethan felt his blood boil. "Enough is enough. I'm calling the police." "No," Laura said quickly. "I'll handle it. I don't want to drag you or the kids into this any further." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're not handling this alone, Laura. He's been manipulating you long enough. It's time to put an end to this." Together, they contacted Margot, who helped them forward the evidence to the authorities. Within hours, the police raided Nathan's apartment, uncovering not only the photos but also incriminating evidence linking him to multiple blackmail schemes. Nathan's reign of terror was officially over. A glimmer of hope. With Nathan out of the picture, Ethan and Laura began the slow process of rebuilding their relationship. It wasn't easy. Trust was fragile, and the wounds of betrayal ran deep. But for the first time in months, there was a glimmer of hope. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Laura turned to Ethan. "Do you think we'll ever be okay again?" Ethan looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I think we owe it to ourselves and to the kids to try." Laura nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes." Ethan reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "So will I." Moving forward, over the next few weeks, the Moore family began to find their footing again. Ethan and Laura started attending counseling, while Emma and Josh slowly opened up about their feelings. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a step in the right direction. One weekend, Ethan surprised the kids with a trip to the beach, a tradition they hadn't done in years. As they laughed and played in the waves, Ethan felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe that healing was possible. Stay tuned for the final chapter, where Ethan and Laura face the ultimate question. Can love truly conquer all? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Story Tales for the emotional conclusion of this story. Asterisk asterisk a moment of truth. After weeks of counseling and carefully navigating the minefield of their relationship, Ethan and Laura were at a crossroads. The sessions had been draining, uncovering years of suppressed frustrations and miscommunications. But they'd also sparked moments of vulnerability that reminded them of why they fell in love in the first place. One night, after another long counseling session, Laura sat across from Ethan at the kitchen table. Her hands trembled as she held a steaming mug of tea. "Ethan," she began hesitantly, "do you think you'll ever really forgive me?" Ethan sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I don't know, Laura. Forgiveness isn't something that just happens overnight. It's a process. But you're trying, right?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan looked into her eyes, searching for the woman he had married, the woman he had trusted with his heart. "Yes, I'm trying. But it's not just about forgiving you. It's about rebuilding the trust we lost. That's the hard part." Laura nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes." The kids' breaking point. While Ethan and Laura struggled to navigate their fractured marriage, Emma and Josh were reaching their breaking points. The tension in the house was palpable, and it was taking a toll on both of them. One evening, Ethan overheard an argument between the siblings. Emma's voice was sharp with anger. "Why are you defending her, Josh? She's the one who ruined everything." "I'm not defending her," Josh shot back. "I just think maybe we should give her a chance." "A chance to do what?" "Mess up again," Emma snapped. Ethan stepped into the room, his presence immediately silencing them. "That's enough," he said firmly. "I know this is hard for both of you, but yelling at each other isn't going to help." Emma turned to him, her eyes blazing. "Then what will, Dad? Pretending like everything's fine? Acting like she didn't destroy our family?" Ethan took a deep breath, struggling to keep his emotions in check. "Emma, I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm asking you to give this family a chance to heal. That's all." Emma stormed out of the room, slamming the door to her bedroom. Josh looked at Ethan, his expression conflicted. "I don't know if she'll ever get over this." "Maybe not," Ethan admitted. "But we have to keep trying." An unexpected twist. Just as it seemed like the family was beginning to stabilize, a new complication arose. One afternoon, Ethan received a call from an unfamiliar number. He answered cautiously. "Hello, Mr. Moore, this is Detective Ramirez. I'm calling regarding the ongoing investigation into Nathan Hale." Ethan's stomach tightened. "What about him?" "There's been a development," the detective said. "During the search of his property, we uncovered evidence that suggests he was planning to escalate his blackmail scheme against your wife." Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. "What kind of evidence?" "Correspondence and drafted documents," Ramirez explained. "It appears he intended to use private information to extort not just your wife, but potentially your entire family." Ethan felt a wave of anger and fear wash over him. "What happens now?" "We're preparing additional charges against Mr. Hale," Ramirez said. "But I thought you should be informed, given the potential impact on your family." Ethan thanked the detective and hung up, his mind racing. He realized that Nathan's actions had left scars that wouldn't heal easily, but he also knew this was an opportunity to finally put the past behind them. A family united. Ethan decided it was time to have an honest conversation with the kids. That evening, he called Emma and Josh into the living room. Laura sat beside him, visibly nervous but determined to face the fallout. "There's something we need to talk about," Ethan began, his tone serious but calm. "You both know that Nathan caused a lot of damage to this family. What you don't know is that he planned to do even worse." He explained what the detective had told him, carefully choosing his words to avoid overwhelming them. Emma's eyes widened with shock, while Josh looked down, his expression troubled. "So he's the bad guy in all of this," Emma said bitterly. "But Mom still let him into our lives." Laura flinched at the accusation but didn't argue. Instead, she spoke with quiet resolve. "You're right, Emma. I did, and I'll never forgive myself for it. but I want you to know that I'm doing everything I can to make things right." Emma crossed her arms, clearly skeptical. But Josh spoke up, his voice hesitant. "Does this mean we're safe now? That he can't hurt us anymore?" "Yes," Ethan said firmly. "The police have everything they need to make sure Nathan never bothers us again." There was a long silence before Emma finally spoke. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Mom." "Not yet." Laura nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "I understand, Emma, and I'll wait as long as it takes." The climax, Ethan's decision. With Nathan out of the picture and the family slowly beginning to heal, Ethan faced the most difficult decision of all. Whether to give his marriage a second chance or to walk away for good. One evening, he found himself standing in the backyard, staring at the treehouse he had built for Emma and Josh years ago. It was a symbol of the life they had built together, a life that had been shaken but not entirely destroyed. Laura joined him, her presence tentative. "Do you remember the summer we built that?" she asked, her voice soft. Ethan nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You wanted it done in a weekend. It took me 3 months." Laura chuckled, the sound tinged with sadness. "I remember, but it was worth it. The kids loved it." They stood in silence for a moment before Laura spoke again. "Ethan, I know I don't deserve a second chance. But if you're willing to try, I promise I'll do everything I can to rebuild what we lost." Ethan turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "I don't have an answer for you yet, Laura, but I'm willing to take it one day at a time." Laura nodded, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "That's all I could ever ask for." Stay tuned for the emotional finale of Ethan's journey, where he and his family face the ultimate test of love and resilience. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Story Tales for the final chapter of this gripping story, Healing Wounds. In the days following their backyard conversation, Ethan and Laura approached their relationship with caution. They agreed to take things slowly, focusing first on co-parenting and ensuring that Emma and Josh felt supported and heard. It wasn't a perfect system. There were tense moments and unresolved emotions, but it was a start. Counseling continued, not just for Ethan and Laura but for the entire family. Emma and Josh had their own sessions, where they could openly express their feelings without fear of judgment. Emma, who had been the most resistant to reconciliation, slowly began to soften. One evening, after a particularly emotional session, she sat beside Laura on the couch. "I'm still angry at you," Emma said, her voice quiet but steady. "But I miss you too." Laura's eyes filled with tears as she reached for her daughter's hand. "I miss you too, sweetheart, and I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust again." It was a small step, but it meant the world to both of them. A family's second chance. Ethan, ever the pragmatist, had been keeping a close eye on the family's progress. He knew rebuilding their lives would be a marathon, not a sprint, but he was encouraged by the strides they were making. Laura had been true to her word, throwing herself into counseling and taking every opportunity to repair her relationships with the kids. One evening, as the family sat around the dinner table, Josh brought up an idea. "What if we went camping?" he suggested. "Like we used to." Ethan glanced at Laura, surprised by the suggestion. Camping had been a family tradition in happier times, a way for them to unplug and reconnect. Emma, to everyone's surprise, nodded in agreement. "Yeah, I think that'd be nice." Laura's smile was tentative but hopeful. "I'd love that." The trip was planned for the following weekend, and as they packed up the car and headed to the mountains, Ethan couldn't help but feel a flicker of optimism. The campsite was familiar, nestled by a serene lake surrounded by towering pines. As the family pitched their tent and built a fire, the tension that had plagued them for months seemed to melt away, replaced by laughter and a sense of togetherness. That night, as they sat around the campfire roasting marshmallows, Emma broke the silence. "I know things will never be the same," she said, staring into the flames. "But I think we can be okay. Eventually." Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, his heart swelling with pride. "We'll get there," he said. "Together." Laura's redemption. Back in the real world, Laura continued to prove her commitment to change. She had started volunteering at a local women's shelter, sharing her story to help others avoid the mistakes she had made. It was a humbling experience, but it gave her a sense of purpose and a way to channel her regret into something positive. She also made amends with her sister, who had been one of the first to call out her behavior during the affair. Their relationship, once strained, was slowly mending. Laura's efforts didn't go unnoticed by Ethan, who found himself admiring her strength and determination. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Laura approached Ethan in the living room. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "For what?" Ethan asked, setting down the book he'd been reading. "For giving me a chance to make things right," Laura replied. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful every day." Ethan studied her for a moment before speaking. "You've worked hard, Laura, and the kids see that. I see it. Just keep doing what you're doing." The final step. As the months passed, Ethan realized that he had a decision to make. While progress had been made, the question of whether to fully reconcile with Laura still loomed over him. One evening, during a quiet moment in his office, he reflected on everything they had been through. The betrayal, the pain, the hard work to rebuild their family. It had all led to this moment. The next morning, Ethan called a family meeting. Laura, Emma, and Josh sat around the table, their expressions curious but cautious. Ethan took a deep breath before speaking. "I've been thinking a lot about us," he began, "about where we've been and where we're going. And I've come to a decision." He turned to Laura, his gaze steady. "I'm willing to give us another chance. Not because it's easy, but because I believe in what we had and what we can have again." Laura's eyes filled with tears, but this time, they were tears of joy. "Thank you, Ethan. I won't let you down." He smiled faintly, then looked at Emma and Josh. "This doesn't mean everything will be perfect. We'll still have challenges, but I believe we can face them together." Emma and Josh nodded, their expressions hopeful. For the first time in a long time, the Moore family felt like a unit again. A new beginning. The story didn't end with a perfect happily ever after. Life was messy and healing took time. But the Moore family had found something stronger than perfection. They had found resilience. Ethan and Laura continued to work on their marriage, rediscovering the love and partnership that had once been their foundation. Emma and Josh thrived in the newfound stability, their laughter filling the house once more. One sunny afternoon, as the family enjoyed a picnic in the backyard, Ethan looked around at the people he loved most. They weren't the same family they had been before, but in many ways they were stronger. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan felt at peace. Thank you for watching this emotional journey on Story Tales. If you enjoyed Ethan's story and want to see more gripping tales like this, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, keep your hearts open and your minds curious.